Hi, I'm Mark from Property Ventures. Welcome to this week's New Zealand Property Podcast, where we interview the property expert around New Zealand. As property investors, there are some key people we require on our team of experts. One of these experts can give us great advice on whether a property is worth purchasing or not. Today we talk to Adrienne from Property in Depth about this and many other topics, including how to improve the value of your property. We hope you enjoy the show. Today we have Adrienne Mikkelsen from Property in Depth Rotorua on the line. She seems to keep extremely busy and she's very experienced in her field. In saying this, whenever I've dealt with her in the past, she's always been really generous of her time and helped me out, just sort of talking about a property and finding my way around establishing what the price of the property might be. So welcome today, Adrienne.
Hi Mark, how are you?
Yeah, very, very well. Nice to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Just so the listeners can learn a bit about yourself, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up being a broker?
Yep, sure. A property valuer.
Yes.
Back in the early 90s, I was actually going to be an accountant, and I went to Lincoln University and did an accounting degree. I pretty much just fell into valuation. It wasn't because I had developed this love for property or anything like that. I just saw something interesting and saw some potential. So when I finished my accounting degree, I went to Massey for a year and did a postgraduate diploma in valuation. In 1997, I was able to get a job up here in Rotorua and worked for the firm Reed & Reynolds. I had 3 years here and then I headed off overseas. When I came back after about 5.5 years, I went to work in Wanganui. It was kind of at the height of the market, so it was extremely busy and a really good time to actually be kind of back doing valuation. I got my registration in 2006, I think it was, and then late 2007 I got offered the opportunity to come back to Rotorua and work for another firm. I also now have my associate of the New Zealand Institute of Valuer status. In late 2009, I just saw the opportunity to be self-employed with Property in Depth, and I took that and started out on my own. So it's been almost 4.5 years of doing that. I have one other valuer that works for me as well.
Yeah, I just noticed you've had someone jump on board with you recently, so that's obviously getting...
Well, yeah, we need two people to manage the workload, so that's a really good sign.
Yeah, well, that is a good sign, and I suppose
Absolutely.
It shows a bit about where the market is at the moment. Also, Property in Depth is a company some may have heard of, a lot of people wouldn't have heard of. What I've sort of established in the last wee while, they are getting more and more around the country. So whereabouts in the country?
Yeah, so we have a franchise structure, which is quite different to a number of the ways that valuation firms have been set up throughout the country. Started in 2005, 2006 with Renee up in Auckland, which a lot of investors probably know of. Now have franchisees throughout Auckland. Pretty much we have full coverage in Auckland. We have Ruben, who is in Whangarei and covering the Northland area. Ross is in Hamilton. Mike and I here, we cover Western Bay of Plenty, Rotorua, South Waikato, which includes Tokoroa, and I can go down as far as Owakuni. We have someone in Wellington, someone top of the South Island, and we're looking at getting a couple of people into Christchurch and the North Canterbury region. We have about 27 or 28 valuers on board with us. So we are the biggest solely residential valuation company in New Zealand, and that's all we do, is we're residential specialists.
Okay, you're certainly getting out there. In fact, in the top of the South, I can vouch for Di Schultz. Di Schultz come on board a couple of years ago, I think, and she's got someone else on board helping her, so her business is obviously getting better too. So
absolutely.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Okay,
so what the listeners are here for today is listen to what a valuer does, how they can assist someone in purchasing a property, or doing other reasons why people want valuations, which we'll talk about shortly. But what do you see as a major service a valuer provides to not only an investor, to anyone buying a house?
I think our major service is really about taking the emotion of a purchase. Even with investors, there is still some emotion to drive why they're making, their property purchase, say in terms of that drive to get financial security. So our job is to take that emotion out and just to provide them with independent advice. A lot of clients, particularly investors, invest out of an area that they know. So here to give them a really good insight into how our market operates. But it's just, giving them the ability to make really wise, sensible decisions to grow their portfolio. Yeah, it's really how I see it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And like the first one you said, taking the emotion out of the equation, and if the figures stack up, and we have investors all around the world and around the country, and as you said, out of town people, and if the figures stack up, it can make the decision a whole lot easier and get that emotion side of it. Because we are all emotional when it comes to buying a property when you sort of first start off. That can sometimes be a hindrance.
Absolutely, because there's a lot of information available to people, and we just sit in and we do our job. We try to provide people with facts and figures, and ultimately the last thing we want to see is people trip up and make unwise decisions. So even if sometimes people might not like or agree with the advice we're not giving to them. We're not doing it to make it difficult for them. Ultimately, we want to save them a lot of pain and heartache and financial stress, to be honest.
One thing I've just noticed over the last couple of years, and it might be a hangover from 2007 and 8, I'm not quite sure, so some banks will only deal with a certain valuers around the country, which makes you think, what do the other valuers do and why do they bother working? But why is that the case? And I know Property and Depth is one of the companies that the banks do take values from.
It's a fallout from the peak of the market. The underlying reason really is that banks want to ensure that their valuers are independent, because ultimately it is actually the bank that is the valuer's client. So while we appreciate that it's you that pays our bill, ultimately our fiduciary responsibility is to the bank. And so what the banks are trying to remove is any issues where the value may be lent on by clients to get what they want. So there's two, scenarios in New Zealand at the moment. One, there are banks that have just a list of panel valuers, not necessarily that the valuers have gone through any screening or application process, but the banks have just looked at a large number of valuations they've received and said, yes, we want these people on our panel. If they're not on that list, we won't accept their valuations. The other situation that we have is a company called PIQ, where I believe three of the banks have to send their valuations through to a clearinghouse, and then they decide who is going to get the valuation based on their list. And that was quite an onerous application process. That is very much led from the Australian owners of their banks, and that's how it happens in Australia. So ultimately it will probably be how the valuation profession is heading. And it's all about maintaining that independence between valuer and client, and the banks protecting themselves.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I know I deal with mortgagee sales I have over the last couple of years, and that sort of works a wee bit different again, and they only sort of deal with select deals, and in fact they seem to take the value that they want to take. Okay, right. So most people think you need a valuer just to for when you buy a house for the finance, and I know that's not the case. What sort of reasons do you do your valuations, and what would be the main reason?
The main reason really is when the bank demand it. We get a lot of phone calls and people say, oh, the bank said I need to get a valuation. And it's a very negative, often connotation in their voice around getting that valuation. That's often the first entry into or introduction into that client. The other reasons will be people refinancing to pay off short-term debt or to get equity to be able to renovate, or obviously in the case of investors, if they can get equity out of a property, they can then go ahead and buy more. People buying and selling, I find it very encouraging when people come to me at the beginning of the process if they want to sell a property or buy a property, and they just want to get the price right. But ultimately, probably 80 to 85% of our work is that when someone buys a property and it's a condition of their finance that they get a registered valuation. So that's just the nature of the game. Obviously, I'd love more people to use our services and seek our advice at the beginning of the process. It can make it a lot less stressful, but it's an education process that the valuation profession has to do around where we should be in that process of buying and selling property.
Can certainly vouch for the reason for doing it before you do a project. And in fact, go back a couple of years, I did a project in a renovation in Nelson, and I just recommend this to anyone listening. Is we walked around the property before I brought it before we did the renovation, and I had a real estate agent who would help me sell it eventually. I had the valuer, I had a property manager and my builder, and between 4 experts walking around, that was exceptional good way to have everyone talking to each other, and then we had a really good idea of, if we did exactly this, what it will value, what it will sell, and yeah, I can see why you'd like doing that at the start of a project.
The thing that I try to explain to people is that for, say in our situation, less than $600, the valuation is either going to come back at or relatively close to the price you've offered. It's either going to come back less, which should allow you the ability to negotiate based on that valuation, or it will come back higher and you have equity. So, say, for example, you spend $600 and you find it values up to, say, $10,000 above what you pay for it. That's a pretty good return on investment.
Yeah, well, either of those 3 options are a pretty good return on investment, I'd say.
It's often a lot harder with the first home buyers because they're a little bit more conscious of all the costs that are going out. But I think a valuation can be one of the best returns on investment that you can make. So I encourage people, obviously, to get one as often as possible.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. So when you do a valuation, is it you do it on purchasing a house for someone or for refinancing for the bank, and that can be for a whole range of things, as you said, for either you've just renovated or you want to get some equity in the house so you can buy another one. Are there sort of any difference? Do you look at them when you should go around and do the valuation? Do you look at them differently, or?
No, because ultimately, even for a refinance, always in the back of our head is, if this property or if this client was to get themselves into trouble and the property had to go to mortgagee auction, it is up to the bank to sell it, and they have to be able to sell it at, appreciate that obviously they will sell it mortgagee, but they have to have relied on that information and know that that was a fair market value. So the issue obviously is that a property value will always fall within a range, and that's just the nature, I guess, of human psychology when they're working around negotiation. But ultimately, in the back of our head, the number is what would this property sell for. So I don't really believe that there are any differences between those 2 valuations.
Yeah, that's quite nice and refreshing to hear, I guess. And one thing I do, some valuers I struggle with around the country, or who I've talked to over the past 7 or 8, 10 years, is, and you mentioned then about mortgagee auctions. Just jumping onto the mortgagee side of it. Basically, if you look at 4 properties that have just sold in the region, and one was a mortgagee auction and might have been 20% or 30% lower than the other 2 or 3, do you take that property into consideration when you work out the price of another house?
No. The interesting thing is that even when we're analysing our sales, we have to look at each of those sales and think, does that sale price fall within acceptable market value? So in a way, you're also doing a valuation of each sale property that you're using in your sales comparison. So the underlying theory of doing a valuation is the property would transact for between a willing buyer and a willing seller, neither of which are under any onerous circumstances. So you don't use a mortgagee sale property as a basis of forming your opinion as to what the fair market value of your subject property is. So, and those things come down to local knowledge as well. Having been to mortgagee auctions, knowing what's selling at mortgagee, we can see straight away that sales price is a little bit lower. We might just start to investigate a little bit further and find out. But, when you're completing a fair market valuation, you shouldn't be taking mortgagee sale properties into consideration.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I had a few interesting discussions over previous years. To be fair, not for quite a while, with the valuers, and they kept taking mortgagee sales into account. And I was always under the understanding that it was a transaction between a willing buyer, willing seller, and as you said, a fair market. And as you said, it goes the other way around too. If there was for some reason, extremely high price property for whatever reason, you can't really take that in consideration, I guess, for the normal.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we do, obviously, if we are asked to do a valuation for mortgagee sale purposes, then we will try and find some mortgagee sales in order to find out what discount the market is making. But that's a different assessment of value. So
yeah, I imagine that's quite different, and then you've got to take into consideration, I guess, is the how the owner is, and if can they get access to the place, and all those
exactly,
bits and pieces. There's a lot more factors.
absolutely,
It's another
absolutely,
half-hour conversation
yeah.
in itself, I guess. In fact, I'll just ask you a question that you'll probably hate for me to ask you. And I've just rung up some valuers around the country, and they've been terrific. I've rung up some, and they all just don't want to talk to me, and it's fair enough in a way, because I don't know them. I haven't built up a relationship with them. What happens if someone, they ring up, they want to get a valuation, or they potentially just want to get a guide of where you see a property, value? Would you talk to them? I know you're extremely busy in your job, or is it a matter of they've paid you a couple of times before to get that, to have that talk with you, or what's sort of your call on it?
Yep. I mean, I don't have an issue with people ringing up and asking for information. You have to be aware that in some respects that information is very guarded, because we're making certain assumptions around the property. Until you've seen it, you can't be 100%. I welcome talking to people, because I do hopefully believe that it will turn into a job at some stage. But if I'm totally honest, then there is obviously a limit. And I can't talk to everybody all the time, because then I would never get any work done. But there are definitely some things and questions that I can answer and provide guidance for. But ultimately, I guess if someone wants the full answer, then they need to pay for evaluation, because that is also, in some respects, it's a little bit of a disservice by me not being able to provide them with comprehensive information. And people only hear what they want to hear too. So I am happy to talk to people, but they just have to be aware that it can be discarded, because I don't know the full details of a property, and you can never find that until you've done, the full amount of research and investigation, and that includes an inspection of the property and searching the certificate of title.
Okay. Right, there'll be a few listeners today, and they'll be thinking of, or they will be renovators, or want to be renovators and never done it before. So from your side, if an investor wants to add value to a property, and I know it's very generic because every property is so different, but what would be some hints you would give them to add value so the value will increase?
Obviously, it depends on each nature of the property. I think one of the first things really is as I see the market, how the market is, I see the property, how the market is going to see it. So the first thing people want to see is a good looking house from the street. So gardens tidied, good neutral decor is really good, lawns mowed, nice fencing. The initial first impression can really help level of value on the inside, and obviously it depends on where they're planning to pitch the property. So is it just for tenancy, or is it for resale? Level of the market they're working in, is it the lower level or is it the upper level? But good neutral colours are always good. A level of fixtures and fittings that match the quality in the market that they're working in. So, for an example, in Rotorua, in your sub $200,000 market, I wouldn't advise putting a granite bench top in, or going over the top with your fixtures and fittings. It really just has to be clean and tidy and simple. Charging is always good. Even just a carport will make a difference to its saleability and the ability to rent it. Any items of deferred maintenance that might turn into an issue later. If there's any leaking, if the roof needs to be repaired, if there's any rot, all those things just help create that really strong impression. That's the simple way. Obviously, there's ways looking at adding bedrooms or another bathroom, but that's quite a big job, and you would need to have a conversation with a valuer to make sure that there is no over-capitalisation, which can be quite easy in Rotorua and particularly in this market.
Yeah, and as you see, that if someone's looking at doing that or adding value, if you can, or depending on how it works, get you around the property and before you start doing it. And
absolutely, and I'm more than happy. Rotorua is a small place, so I'll usually be passing by somewhere or pop out, and it's just a conversation. It's best to look at the property. Everyone has different perceptions of how poorly or well presented a property may be, and sometimes it can be hard to explain it over the phone. So really, sometimes just a site visit to see what your plans are. to say, yes, I think that's a good idea, or no, maybe you should do this instead of that, or have you thought about doing this? Because the worst thing you can do, especially when you're starting out, is overcapitalise, because then it just ties up your capital. It makes it hard to get to that next stage.
That's right, and people who are doing this, they should be treating it like a business. So you get the your best people and your experts and who are on your team to help you decide what you're going to do, and we don't want to use and abuse the professionals, and that's one thing I'm very careful of with what I do, because if you get someone to do 10 or 15 small jobs and they're not being paid, then they'll
exactly.
and that's the thing, you be loyal to your people. If someone helps you, you use them in the future, and I'm sure that's how you've got a lot of good clients coming back to you, and you don't mind doing that for them. I guess that's the case.
No, it's good. It's good. It's many more people. It's learning people, and if you start to create that relationship without, in some respects, expecting anything out of it, just building a level of trust between the two of you, then, in theory, that client will come back to us when they need us. So, and 95% of people do. It's just a timing issue, and I appreciate that if people don't like my advice, they can go somewhere else, but at least I'd like them to take the time to talk to me and tell me what they're planning to do and how I can help them.
Have you got any just examples of anything, or any one particular project that stood out for you where you've valued a place and someone's gone and added the value and had a terrific result? Is there any examples you can pull off the top of your head? Or
off the top of my head, I'm just trying to think. I've done a lot. The best ones that I see are where people have bought them below value. Is it mortgagee, or not every sale that's purchased is bought at mortgagee. Sometimes people just need to get out, whether they're unwell or going overseas. So those are the best ones to buy, because then you often can have a good level of equity to begin with. Yeah. Some of the best ones are when people have the ability to turn accommodation into some kind of self-contained accommodation, because then they can get another rental stream, and that can add a lot of extra value in proportion to what it is that they would have to spend to get it to that stage. So whether it's, I'm thinking maybe a little bit of High Street, the one that we did in High Street, that was probably a really good example, that the people living in it were a family that covered the 2 floors. The people that bought it were able to convert it, and they now have 2 units of accommodation that they can rent out for more than if they were just to rent it out as one house.
And then as a normal house. That's great. In fact, just moving on from that question, I guess, is a lot of people, they're buying their investment properties for the extra incomes or what have you, and just gave a great example of that. Can you just explain briefly what a capitalisation rate is and when you would use it in a valuation?
So the capitalisation rate, it's known by a number of different things: yield, return, risk. Basically, the best way to describe it is if you invest your money in the bank, you'd expect to get 3% interest maybe. So you would get a small amount of income for that capital investment. Buying a property is the same. You're investing your capital, and we'll take away out any lending issues, but you're investing your capital and you expect to get a return off your money. One of the things I would want to just encourage people to think about is that the higher the return, the greater the risk. It's an inverse relationship. Yeah. So if people talk about, obviously say with the bank, 3% is guaranteed. It's a very low level of risk, so people don't mind accepting a lower return. The greater the risk, the higher return, and the lower the value. So, for example, in Rotorua, blocks of flats, if I work on a gross return, can be anywhere between, say, 7 and 8%. If you were to go to somewhere like say Tokoroa or Murupara, the risk is a lot higher, 15, 18%. We have investors ring up and say, hey, I found this property in Tokoroa, it's great, it's got an 18% return. What that actually means is it's incredibly risky. So people need to find that balance of having a good return. Yes, they're probably going to face some risk, but not being overly risky.
Yeah, and there's a really fine line of getting that right property, developing whatever it is to get
exactly.
that higher. Yeah.
You want a good return on your money. You want to get more than the bank, but the reason that return is higher is because it is riskier. So, and how we do it, to work out the value, we take the rental income stream, we've analysed our sales to see what the market is paying for in terms of that risk, and then we apply that an appropriate return. You know, that return can take into consideration location, the quality of the property. You know, if it's in not a good location and it's not very well maintained, then the risk is going to be higher because you need to pay less for it to be able to bring it up to standard, for example. Or if it's something, say, in the central city, it's always going to be easy, but in Rotorua, it's always going to be able to be rented. So you might be prepared to take a little bit less risk because it's more of a secure investment, or perceived as more of a secure investment.
Okay, so and you'll have your general for each area. What you consider to be the average yield?
It's starting to become pretty clear. In Rotorua, there haven't been many investment sales, so it's been quite difficult. But it's reasonably clear that in the central city is higher because it's going to be easier to rent. I guess that's probably the same anyway. But then it might be you might have a good location yield, but then you have to think, well, that the units need to be updated, or this is wrong and that is wrong, and then you start to adjust for that. So it's not quite as clear cut as going that's the percentage yield for that particular location, because there's a bunch of other factors to take into account.
Right. Okay. Well, you're based in Rotorua, and there's be quite a few people listening here will have places in or property in Rotorua, or be looking at the area. I know that for sure. So, what's your picture on where things are at the moment, and what's going to happen in the upcoming years with your crystal ball that you have?
You know, I mean, Rotorua is an interesting place because geographically it is extraordinarily well placed. You know, we're 2.5 hours from Auckland, we're 45 minutes from the beach, we're close to Hamilton, we're close to Taupo. We have an international airport, but we have struggled to get population growth. As an example, that period of time between the last two censuses, Tauranga grew by 11,000, we dropped by 660, what effectively means our population was static. You won't really get capital growth until you get a pressure on supply. So an increased level of demand. We have a new mayor who wants to turn the city around. It is crystal ball gazing as to whether she does that, and I obviously really hope that she does. But I would say for the foreseeable future, we'll possibly be struggling to get great capital growth. But I hope that in the long-term future, there's potential to get that. The thing in Rotorua probably at the moment, you've got cash flow, which you might in other cities such as Tauranga, I think is pretty poor for cash flow, but then they're probably going to get capital growth because they're getting population growth. Rotorua is probably a good way into the investment market, though you have to be pretty careful about where and what you buy. But it's probably as good a time to buy as any, because I think there is potential that we will grow with everything that we have going on here. So, but sometimes you just don't know. It's really hard just to see the future.
Oh, it is, and as you said, there is, for a lot of the places around the country, Rotorua certainly does have the slightly better cash flow than most. And as you said, if it is flat at the moment, you'd like to think, one day in the future, who knows when it is, it will pick up, and what overflow you might get from the Tauranga.
Absolutely. I mean, the mountain Tauranga are quite expensive. We have an eastern arterial going through this Eastern Bay of Plenty that will make commuting between those two places a lot easier. So as people find that maybe prices in those areas are a bit too expensive, they might start looking down to Rotorua and cheaper. So yeah, but it's a great place to live, work and play. It absolutely is. I encourage anyone to move here, really, and help that population growth that we need.
Excellent. You should jump on with the mayor, I think, trying to promote the city like that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Just sort of to wrap up, do you have any final comments or variables when deciding evaluation, and also how does someone get hold of you if they are looking to do a valuation in Rotorua?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the variables and valuation, obviously it's going to depend on location is key, ultimately. Look at use of the land, how the property is presented, what the potential is in terms of being able to, say, renovate and create equity or create growth out of that renovation. Units, for example, we look at income streams. We always look at what could be done to improve the appeal and presentation of the property, because that can improve the value. And there's a multitude of variations, and that's probably a whole other conversation as well. In terms of getting hold of me, best is on my cell phone, is 021 776 303. A phone call is always good, just as an introduction, and then I'm happy to take texts. Email address is also very good, which I hope that you'll put on the site, because it'll be easier than trying to spell it out. And we do have a call centre which can take calls for booking and valuations. So, technologically savvy and texting is great just for quick replies and things like that. So, I look forward to hearing from people.
Great work. Yeah, I'd really just like to thank you for your time today, Adrienne. Your wisdom you have on valuations and also your availability that you have been for not only myself but other clients I know that you've used you in the past. So it's a pleasure to be working with someone like yourself, and great to have you on the show today.
We would like to thank Adrienne today for sharing a little bit of her knowledge about valuations on property. If you have any requests or suggestions you would like to hear on the show, please contact us at propertyventures.co.nz. We hope you enjoyed the show.